And we are live. Welcome to Life Action Roleplay with
Cynthia Marie.
I'm Kai Norman.
and Ryan Omega joining us for today's topic of Bleed Under Quarantine is Tessa Thurman. Please say hi and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Tessa, an avid LARPer and a student of brains, so that's my contribution.
What LARPs have you played in that people might know you from?
Oh, goodness. Well, a lot of Dystopia Rising, some Outbound Hope, a lot of Valhalla and Valhalla Season 2. There's been plenty.
And as per tradition, what is everyone drinking today? Cynthia, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking water from my fancy straw.
Kai.
I'm drinking tea because I'm British apparently, and I need to adhere to a stereotype.
Perfect. Tessa.
I'm drinking cheap Merlot with amaretto, which is called Klingon blood wine around here.
Ooh,
Nice.
fancy. And I am drinking this V8 sparkling energy drink that I randomly got at the grocery outlet, and it's actually really good. 4 for $1.50, not bad at all. And next, shout outs. Does anybody have any shout outs for people today? Let's start with Sin.
Yeah, well, start with my usual shout out to everybody who is still fighting the good fight. Keep on fighting. We've got elections coming up, so keep doing what you're doing. Stay strong out there. My specific shout out, it's actually going to go to the cast and our GM and the crew from Hyper RPG. We played Kids on Brooms. It was the show's called Balboa Academy on Hyper, and it was our premiere episode on Tuesday, and it was so much fun. So shout out to our GM Matt. He did an incredible job creating like such a beautiful world for San Diego, it being a magical and wizarding. And we've got 2 more episodes to go. So yeah, just shout out to an amazing, fun role play experience on Tuesday.
Hi.
I'm gonna give a shout out. I hope so. This person is an amazing asset to Dystopia Rising, and they bust their butt so hard. And I don't remember if I thanked her last time because of her wonderful effort, but I'm thanking her either again or now because Ariel is an absolute champion and has been so talented at inputting some of the logistical information that our players just submit all the way through game, that she's had games where she's been finished before game is finished, which in terms of LARP paperwork is almost unheard of. So she is a champion and far more than we deserve at NorCal. So thank you.
Tessa.
I guess I'll give a shout out to the LARP, online LARP Valhalla. It's spelled with 2 1s, so I'm not sure if this will show up right, but like that. And it's really groundbreaking. They're using a system called Gather, so your character can walk around and only video chat with certain characters in certain environments. So not everyone knows the same information like a standard TTRPG.
Nice. My shout out is to a dear friend who I haven't role played with in a while, but they have helped me with something that I just acquired recently. My shout out is to my friend Aki, who is, first of all, a wonderful role player, but they mentioned recently that their organization was looking for a producer, and they recommended me, and I ended up securing the position. So I will be one of the live stream producers for Indiecade that is coming up next month. And we're going to hit the ground running. And if you're not familiar with Indiecade, it is a convention, right now a virtual convention that deals with independent games and recognizing some of the best that is out there that are very forward thinking or different perspectives or just unusual mechanics that make games interesting and fun. So I am super excited to be joining that team and producing that this year. That also means my schedule will be very erratic. So now that we got that out of the way, for today's topic, the topic for today is bleed under quarantine. And I did talk to our hosts and our guests earlier about how bleed is a very common idea in LARP, and it's still not a common idea for role playing in general. Some live streamers have experienced this, but not knowing what it is. And even tabletop role players might even experience it if their characters are in an emotional, intense state. So I guess the first question will be to all of our hosts and guests: how would you describe bleed to someone who doesn't know what it is? And I'd like to start off with Tessa, our guest.
Oh, geez. Well, I think bleed can be applied to a lot of things. It's when you're in one mental state doing some activity and it affects you in some other aspect of your life. So if you're playing a game and you have a lovely interaction with another, you might later believe that, person to person, I like interacting with that person, even though it was just a character to character interaction.
Kai, how would you describe bleed to someone who's not familiar with that concept?
So you've got your character's emotions and feelings, and then you've got your personal emotions and feelings, and there's sometimes a point in time where you can tell the differences and you can parse where your player is and where your character is. Your player is having tons of fun. Your character is really pissed off and angry at something. But there will be times where the actual emotions of your character and you become the same. And sometimes that can be amazing. And other times it can suck. So.
Sin.
I mean, I don't know if I have too much more to add. They kind of like both hit it right on the nose. But usually when I try to explain bleed to like a coworker who doesn't necessarily know anything about LARP, what I usually like to talk about actually is taking your feelings from your outside world and putting it into your character. So if you have a negative feeling towards a said person and your character is going to go interact with them, sometimes you carry that emotion in and you can kind of experience the bleed from the outside world, and then vice versa, obviously what you guys have already explained. But I kind of like to take it from more of the person into the character rather than the other way around when people don't know what LARP is.
I think my favorite explanation of bleed was something that was more, I guess, mundane and relatable, where if you've had a bad day at work and then you go home and you continue to have a bad day, even if you have a wonderful relationship with your family, your lover, your roommates, your pets, and you take it out on them by accident because of how you are feeling, that is bleed. Because a situation that has nothing to do with your current environment was affected by a previous environment that you were in. And I forgot who came up with that explanation, but the moment I heard that, I thought, wow, that's super relatable.
It's real good.
Yeah. Tessa, I know that you yourself wanted to talk about this topic, but you also have a very scientific background when it comes to the approach of bleed. Would you care to discuss what you know about bleed and where the mind is when it comes to role play?
Yeah. So, in terms of scientific perspective, I've been studying biology and psychology for quite a while, and blending mental states with actual brain or neuropsychology is really important to my understanding of how I do things and how I'm experiencing things. So when I think of bleed, I like to think of it as kind of an unavoidable type of situation. People like to think that if they have mental power, they can separate their character from themselves. But since everyone has one brain, even though they're in two different kind of mindsets, there will be transfer. There are ways to, up that transfer if it's positive bleed, or kind of stop it a little bit if it's negative, but it's always going to be there because we share the same brain and the same biological processes to make us think.
Wow. Can you give us an example of bleed that was positive in your life or bleed that was negative in your life, and how it's affected you, since.
Sure. So I think a lot of positive bleed comes from social bonds. So we all go into character, and because LARP tends to happen in a group setting, we experience things all together. And since we're kind of forced together because our characters are, it makes it so there's a sense of community there. There's obviously a lot of nuances here that can turn from good to bad, but it increases a hormone called oxytocin. It's like the cuddly hormone that makes us all want to interact with each other, even though humans are crazy. And it's released a lot during important stressors or big moments. So, for example, I made a bunch of friends when my character had a huge wedding. So that was a huge stressful moment for me as a character, but then I ended up dating the person I married in the LARP. So that was positive for me.
And do you have an example of, if you care to share, like a negative association with bleed?
Um, Negative bleed is difficult to deal with because it activates parts of your brain that are very instinctual and are related to the physical pain part of your body. So when you have emotional pain, or you're socially rejected, that can lead to actual true big fear response and like pain in your heart. So I've had some negative bleed when people dislike my character, even though I know, oh, if they don't dislike me, they just disliked my character. um, and I've had to work really hard with all of this background knowledge to try and be conscious about my thoughts. They don't hate me. That's just the social rejection theory talking. you know
So I wanted to open this question out to the panel here. Um, what are some ways that you can mitigate bleed? And if you have an example to start from, uh, and mitigate and showing how you mitigate that bleed, that would be ideal. But if you're not comfortable with sharing that experience, totally okay.
Or we can come back to you if you want to have a think, because we have been tapping you quite heavily already.
Um, in terms of mitigation strategies, there's quite a couple. Uh, a lot of it builds back to like self-regulation. So we want to be able to thoughtfully separate ourselves from our characters, and being able to have kind of a line between a character and a person, or even like your retail job and your home life, are all based off of a very limited pool of self-regulation. And there have been studies that prove we have a limited amount. So, mitigation strategies include being very open during this process so things aren't as stressful the whole time. Having uh, character interactions that are actually based off of out of game conversations so you kind of know where it's going. Or even just things that bump up your self regulation by reducing stress. So, making sure you step out of game and eat a granola bar. That'll do it.
Mm.
Yeah, we're all very, very good at looking after ourselves at LARPs, aren't we?
That's interesting that you mentioned that, Tessa, because I know that there are some role players who are very averse to breaking a role play moment with a small out of game, like even check-in, because they want to be so much in that moment, since that is what they come to LARP to do. Um, do you have recommendations? And I would open this up to anyone here. Do you have recommendations to someone who you might want to say, check in and a little bit of metagaming is totally okay in this situation?
So if I can jump in, I think a lot of what some people may be missing, especially if they're newer to role playing, is this idea of checking in. And to me, it's kind of an advanced role player's skill set, because we all have developed the idea of being able to check in immediately and be like, oh, I'm having a moment that I need to go check out. A lot of newer role players don't get that, and they get into this challenging situation where they're having a problem internally, but they don't want to leave the scene because it's going to break immersion. Like, I'm of the camp that, like, if you are not emotionally matured or emotionally ready for that moment, you really do need to do these quick check-ins with yourself to start training and being able to get out of those kind of moments. So I think we do need to talk about the advanced skill set of recognizing bleed and how you can get to that advanced skill set, because again, I don't think a lot of people really understand the concept as well as they think they do. We could talk about it in words, but like, what does it actually mean when you're in that situation? So for me, like, the way I check in is, if I can start, this is probably the worst of it for me. Like, I get really emotionally heightened. Like, I can cry on command. Like, that's how, like, close I'm on with my emotions. Um, so for me, if I could actually start feeling my eyes like well up with tears, I'm like, I am too close emotionally to what's going on, and I'll pull myself out of the situation, right? So I think it's also, like, I talk about a lot of the physical stuff. Like, how do you feel physically in your body? Is your body starting to get like a stomach ache? Are you starting to feel the adrenaline drop, like, that jump starts maybe a panic attack? I know, like, my panic attacks start with the adrenaline drop, and I start feeling the, like, weird queasy feeling in my stomach. That's your body physically telling you, like, this is not a great situation. Like, all flags should be, like, raising, and you should be cutting your scene and getting out of there. And I feel like oftentimes role players put themselves in this position of, I got to power through this scene. No, you don't. If your body is physically rejecting this and mentally your brain is telling you to get out, like, get out. Like, you don't have to sit there and do it. And I think also that's kind of where the bleed starts to come into, right? Like, so if you're not checking in with your body, let's say, for example, like Tessa had talked about, like, going to eat a granola bar. If you're on 16 hours of not eating and you are experiencing low blood sugar and you're starting to get, like, really pissy and you start attacking people, like, come back to your body and be like, did I eat? Do I have food that is nourishing my body to energize me and be able to think and act properly, or act straight? I don't want to say properly, like, properly to your character, but, like, thinking and acting like a normal functioning human being. If the answer is no, step away. And step away not only because it's a responsibility to yourself, but it's a responsibility to the players that you're in the scene with.
If I may add, I've absolutely, by running games, I feel like all of us have stories like this. But I've definitely seen times where, like, a player has sprained their ankle and they can't walk, but they don't want to go home. They don't want to go to a hospital or something like that. They would rather just kind of limp around and keep playing, even though, you know, their ankle's swelling up like a balloon. I think maybe that might have something to do with the fact that, you know, like, it's fun. You're getting maybe those cuddly endorphin stuff going. I don't know if that would be true or not, Tessa.
Yeah, well, I guess in this sense, there's a couple things that are all blending together to make that sort of LARP bleed happen. So, for example, typically the fact that they want to stay, even if they're in, like, pain because they sprained their ankle, is due to dopamine. They have a reward system that goes ping whenever they have fun at LARP. So if their brain knows, hey, we're on a schedule here, buddy, you got to get your reward dopamine while we're here, they're going to stay. And the cuddly hormone, oxytocin, is going to stay there and say, hey, you're safe in this social environment. It's going to be scary if you leave it. So gamifying LARPs, having, like, goals you can achieve, these sorts of things add dimensions of dopamine because you reward yourself, bing, and then you want to stay because it was fun. But sometimes you probably should not have fun and go to the hospital. Um, and in terms of Cynthia, a lot of negative LARP bleed is misattribution. So we can connect an in-game experience that is having us have an emotion, a deep-seated physical experience, like your heart is pounding, right? And you have an interpretation of that. Your interpretation could be, my heart is pounding because that bad guy is targeting me and I'm running away from him. But your brain might not consciously know, like, oh, it was Ryan and he's not actually a bad guy. But your little lizard brain, your hindbrain ACC, is going, Ryan bad, Ryan misattribution error, and then you will be stuck in some sort of subconscious way having like antipathy towards Ryan, even though it's just his bad guy chasing you down the hall.
What is you've used that word several times. I've never heard it before. What is the actual definition of that word? Do you know?
Which word?
A misattribution?
So attribution is being able to connect an experience to the cause. So if you want to attribute something to another thing, there is kind of a journey you go through, because instantly, mostly instinctually, feel a certain way about a situation, and then you're going to process it. You're going to attribute it to something, and that's called interpretation. It's not always conscious. You're not doing it on purpose. Your brain's just trying to figure it out. And the more elements that are unusual to it, the more it's going to be confused. So I know what I would attribute things happening to me as I walk down the street to pretty easily. But if it's like a dragon and that guy is firing arrows at me and my heart is beating very fast and I'm like having a panic attack, it's very complicated. So that's kind of attribution.
Awesome. Thank you for the definition there. So Sin, with some of what you were talking about, like some of your observations a little while ago, you were talking about like, taking a step back and kind of like, reevaluating where you are and like, checking on your body levels and stuff. Mm-hmm. When I'm thinking about what you were saying, I immediately start to think, you mentioned the way that LARPers play. Some LARPers don't do the check-in system and stuff like that. They're very focused on the scene, either through enjoyment and passion, or some of them, through less positive reasons and stuff. They're more focused on their gameplay experience and less motivated by other people's experience. But when you were talking about that, it started to make me think, I feel like some of the people who are the most used to the idea of like having that check-in system are the people in real life who utilize communication skills to that extent as well. Like most people, when you think about it, if someone says something shitty to you, I mean, there's a cornucopia of reactions that people can give, but I think one of the rarer ones is someone turning around and basically challenging that person, being like, hey, what you said kind of hurt. Did you mean it that way? Like the level of maturity or even the like experience of like living your life in that manner is definitely a learned skill. Mm-hmm. At least from my perspective.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Like just to add, we've had a couple of very intense scenes on a few shows that I've been on, and kind of checking in with, and I'm going to split here some of the actors versus a role player like myself. Like I'm very quick to ask people like, hey, how are you? How's my sass level? Am I directing it too much at you? Like, do I need to tone it down? And I actually got really offended at one point on a show where me and this character were just getting in on each other, and the person just walked away from it all. And I was like, I don't know what to do in this situation. And after like talking with said person, they're an actor who has been put through the ringer and really intense scenes themselves for a while now. And they're like, that's just how I roll. Like I just do these intense scenes and walk out. I'm like, that's not how I do it. Like I need to check in. Like I need to have this dialogue. Otherwise I'm gonna like have some serious like massive bleed of like, do you actually hate me sort of a deal. So it does come with a maturity level and a skill level that like you have to constantly be doing that. And like I found myself doing it more and more like on my actual job when people are pointing at me. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like the whole check-in system for LARP is very, very grounded on self-care and compassion. You're either kind of approaching someone and being like, hey, that was really intense. I'm getting some weird vibes. Are you okay? Like, are we cool kind of, conversation. And then there's the other side of it, which is the more compassion related, where you're like, hey, I know I was super intense. You do realize all of that was fun. And you're cool. I think you're really awesome, kind of thing. Like those two motivations are, I think, kind of really important for this newer generation of LARPing.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Uh,
I really struggle with it because I know if I had the opportunity without knowing all of this background, I would be a very commit to the bit LARPer. Like, I
Mhm.
wouldn't want to break immersion. I prefer Nordic style LARPs where we have a very big check in at the beginning and then a debrief at the end. But I know that it would help increase everyone's comfort level if we just did happen to break immersion during the middle. So I think it's a very important tool, even if it's not my ideal tool, because I know it's actually backed in like real science. I just don't like it all the time.
Mhm. I know that I also am one of those commit to the bit LARPers. I do remember like my most traumatic bleed experience was rooted in the idea of so in Twin Mask, and I've talked about to the scene to death where it was the dark future and Takaro was um, chained up. He was like the most powerful character in game, but then he was tortured. He was told he should die. He needed he was told all of these things, and I sustained that for an hour. The reason why I sustained that for an hour was because I thought if I broke this moment, a lot of the newer role players won't be able to get their scenes. And so I made myself go through it. But when I was done, it took a lot out of me because being surrounded by people and being told you should die and you're no good is an actual trigger for me. So I made myself go through it because I kept thinking, don't don't break because everybody else is going to get what they need from that scene. But and there was also a little bit of anxiety for me of I didn't want to inconvenience the rest of the player base with what I was feeling because I was in the center of it all.
So
And
I have a real quick question for you guys because like upon what Ryan was saying, it made me realize I'm just gonna go through the videos real quick here.
Mhm.
It sounds like all of you guys play social characters in LARP specifically. Am I correct with that, Tessa? You talked about your character being more like your character that got married. Sound like she's a pretty social character. Am I correct in that inference?
Yeah, it depends on which LARP I'm playing, but my mains tend to be like social characters or like officers or people that interact.
Okay, and Kai, I know you play physical characters, but you're also pretty leaning on the social side. Am I correct?
Yeah, I play political stabby boys, I guess.
Yeah, and Ryan, obviously the powerful character in Twin Mass, a very social character. Am I correct?
Yeah, social, but also support. I want to be able to support a lot of people with
Totally
what I'm
understand.
doing. Yeah.
Totally understand. So I guess the question that I'm about to ask is because I play very physical characters in LARP. In fact, I actually steer away from those more intense scenes because I mean, I can handle some of them, but for the most part, like I'm all about the physical scene. So I guess when I talk about when I'm like checked out or like I can't handle it is because I'm physically putting my body through something and I can immediately go, my body does not like this. So I'm really
Mhm.
curious with you guys, what is your limit in a social setting that causes your brain to kind of go, oh, I'm done. Like I've hit this wall. I'm hitting this bleed. I'm whatever it is that like you need to step back.
Huh.
I'm not good with people just raging in my face, and I know for a fact one of my personal triggers is people either intentionally or unintentionally misrepresenting my words, like cutting you off mid sentence and being like, "Oh, you think I'm this then?" kind of stuff, and it's like, "No, you're not listening." "Oh, you're deaf then." It's like, no. So those are areas I can't touch. Like, yeah.
Just to follow up real quick, because I want everybody to answer this too with a follow up. How would you suggest somebody? What is your solution to that problem when somebody does that to you?
I know I've suffered it out before. I know I've negotiated it before and dropped out and been like, I'm sorry, like this kind of role play is not my jam. I'm really not good with it. So like I've done kind of both routes. I haven't tried anything else on that. But I didn't like trying to muscle through it. like forcing yourself to go through something that you know you're not in your comfort zone sometimes can be really invigorating, but other times it will mess with you heavily. Yeah, I don't have a great piece of advice for that one specifically.
My solution is to just physically walk away. If I have the capacity to say, okay, I need to step away for a few minutes, then I'll do that. But if I am in a mood and I just don't want to deal with that, I will just walk, and I don't care if I'm rude. Because what will happen is after I walk away, I'll be out of the situation. I can collect myself and it can come back into it. And that's even something like if I deal with this in real life, if I'm on a set and a lot of things are intense, I will tell everybody who's around me, I need a few minutes. I'm going to walk away now. Don't talk to me if I'm really, really like just in a mood, because I just need that separation time, collect my thoughts, and then come back and then be able to address things logically. Because if I'm emotionally caught up, I cannot make any logical decisions, nor can I address anyone properly. So it's literally the best way.
What is it that pushes you to that moment? I mean, Kai talked about when somebody rages in his face. Is that similar for you, or is it something else that kind of triggers that moment for you to walk away?
Usually it's either one of two things. I cannot handle when 3 or 4 people talk to me at once. I cannot respond, and my brain literally freezes up. Like there are times when 3 or 4 people will talk to me at once, and I'll go like a robot because I cannot process it. And literally the best thing for me to do is walk away. Or if someone's being a real dick for no reason, when they're being really irrational and they're just doing it to be mean, then I don't care to be nice. I need to walk away before I address you. And unfortunately, there have been situations where people are just dicks, and and that is the best solution. Literally step away from the situation, because talking to them, calming them down is not an option, unfortunately.
So what I've seen you do actually in the instance where you've had 3 or more people coming to talk to you, I've seen you freeze up like that. What I think is interesting is actually how you've solved that problem by actually giving a one-on-one interaction with one person at a time, and you actually walk away from everybody and kind of have like a talk with them. I think that's a really smart solve, because it doesn't necessarily kill the scene that the people are trying to have with you, but it allows you to kind of like diffuse and refocus. Am I watching that correctly? Is that what you're doing there?
Yes.
Okay.
Like if I because even if I'm on set and I'm a stage manager, because this has happened where 3 or 4 people are talking to me, it's like, okay, one at a time, you, and then they tell me things. Okay, do this, you, do this, you, and you. So usually that's what I will do. As my Archduke, luckily that asking for that is never a problem. So I could just go, you, okay, let me help you one at a time, or everyone quiet. And then I take a moment. It's like, all right, now you. Like if you want a more elegant way to get everyone, you actually just get the scene to stop, because usually at that moment, everyone is so frenetic with energy of usually it's because there's something impending that they're trying to rush. But if you can get everything to stop and you have that slight moment of zen, you can actually then control the situation and go, breathe. And sometimes even say, breathe is enough, even in real life and in many situations, will help a role play intensity lower a little bit, because sometimes they're forgetting to just breathe.
Centering yourself. Yeah. Like taking a moment to center is real important.
Totally. And Tessa, what about you? So what is it that what goes on in your head when you're doing a social setting that kind of puts you at that limit?
I guess there are 2 main things. When I think of LARPs, I tend to think of niches. Every character is there to kind of fill a niche, because we all want to be the best at something. And sometimes that something is like giving new players snacks. Or, everyone has their niche. So like I get really defensive, and I know that it happens to me. I get really defensive if someone like approaches my niche. But I have to kind of step back and think like they are also looking for a niche. Like they can have part of the niche or make their own new part of the niche. So it's kind of like being vaguely territorial about what I do in a LARP. But all I know because of studies that have happened, that this is due to like the social rejection response. So we're kind of doing defensive aggression. Like, hey, my group is interacting with you, and that makes me feel bad about myself because I don't know if I'm the best now. I'm gonna be defensively angry at you. And I know that from the ways that I've been looking at research, that it means the offending group will tend to withdraw, and I will tend to withdraw from the offending group. So I will purposely try and blend the two groups together, whether that be in character or out of character, even if I don't really want to, because I know it will kind of make that whole mental error less in the long run. Because we'll both know, hey, I don't hate you. Sorry, I fed a new player a granola bar. When really, they shouldn't be sorry at all.
Oh my god, can I add to this on on a physical level? Like I totally understand what you're meaning, and like the example that flooded my mind is being a pole arm fighter and a line of all armor boys who like all want to like just stand at the front, and I'm like, hi, I have a big reach, like I could actually hit too, and they're like, ah, and I was just, like, I get so angry, and it's literally what you're talking about, because I'm just like, am I not good enough? Like, is this like, why am I not allowed to fight with you guys? Like, I'm just as good, like, and I get really angry. So like, I totally understand what you're saying, and I think it really does boil down to exactly that. So thank you for putting it in terms, because all I see is like She-Hulk, like my smash. I'm going to fight.
That was such a great response, Tessa. Like that was so good.
Yeah, I think everyone has a niche. Even if you don't know it, you're going for a niche. Whether it's in the TTRPG, whether it's in a parlor LARP, whether it's that one guy with a shield that has a funny bird on it, you got a niche.
God, that
Hi,
explains
I'm
so much of.
looking at you with the shield with the funny bird.
Oh my
Shield with
God.
funny bird. Yeah.
I was about to say, like, that explains so much of my roleplay that I didn't know until now. I'm always trying to fill a niche, even if it's just, even in role plays on stream, like either it's the support dwarf or the healer or the person who has like really strange flirtations with people or someone who just has this really powerful fireball. It's like I always role play like that, and I didn't even think about it until you mentioned it.
No joke, mine's Wonder Woman. I literally have found myself trying to be Wonder Woman in every single roleplay, LARP, everything.
Oh my God. Oh, we should
So-
actually get to a question.
Yeah, we have an awesome question that's coming up. Just before we do that bit, way earlier we were talking about some of the coping mechanisms and stuff, and I think one of the things that we might have unintentionally skipped over is the importance of negotiating your relationships with the player of that character. And a relationship can go in any kind of way. Like if you got friends who are lovers and things like that, then you need to be able to trust that player, but also establish the boundary where like people are comfortable. Because if holding hands is good, great. If both of you are fine with like a friend kiss, then that's great. But if one person is into it and another isn't, that can get real awkward and bad real quickly. And one of the biggest truths of LARP is the best enemies that you will ever face in LARP are your best friends, because you emotionally already trust them, and there is that like the foundations there and that wall there of trust and friendship that that you can be a dick to your friend, and like they're gonna tell you if they need you to check in and vice versa, or maybe you do that anyway. But like I always feel like I can pull a lot more if I'm being mean or happy to one of my friends versus interacting with someone I don't really know, because I don't know their comfort levels. So like, yeah, getting to know people is really good.
Can I add real quick on that, just small little note there? Also, interacting with a family member or like your sibling and role playing against them has been a very crazy and interesting moment. If anybody knows, I'll just put this out there real quick. My sister plays a very antagonist character named Klish in Twin Mask. and I played a big bad, the Princess of Nadine, and our characters came head to head, and it was quite an interesting interaction because where her character is very like, pardon the swearing, but like fuck you sort of like character, and the Princess of Nadine is very like sadistic and like, what did you just say to me sort of thing. So like having this interaction and watching people who don't necessarily know that we're related watch the interaction happen around us, they're just like, oh my god, someone's gonna die right now. And they had no idea that we were related at that point, so it's quite funny.
All right, a quick 5 seconds. This is because there is no social rejection response with your best friend.
Oh,
You'll know that they still like you, so you don't have any social pain.
that's awesome. I love the actual reasoning behind that. That's really cool.
I love this discussion.
Tessa,
I love it so much.
It's so awesome having you quantify some of this stuff with quantifying this and being like, yeah, that's because it's so good. Thank you so much for being here with us.
I need to read this research. Like seriously, like my brain just needs to dive into this.
Didn't you write co-write something about it?
Yes. If you want a good summary of a bunch of vaguely or directly relevant studies, there was a kind of some research paper called Bleed Out on the Brain that I helped vaguely co-author with Dr. Diana Leonard, because we were both in the same advanced social psychology class thing. And that's all about the neurology and neurohormones of LARP interaction. And it will get really into why things like positive bleed, negative bleed, and all these things have to do with the brain. So there are studies out there. Some of them are even directly applicable to LARP. They're on LARP. They're not all just picked from the sky, that you can look up. And there is scientific literature about the, study and psychology of play, study and psychology of LARP character interactions even. So Bleed Out on the Brain.
I found that on the internet and I just posted it in chat.
Oh, geez.
So we have a real good question by our audience. Tessa, what kind of studies are there on concepts similar to bleed, if any? Have you seen it referred to by another more clinical name, perhaps? The person asking a question, which is Pagsy the Crabsy. I think I know exactly who that is. So Shay is vaguely familiar with using roleplay in therapy settings, and it strikes them as utilizing the brain science TM of positive bleed.
That's the hard part, is there are lots of studies that refer to kind of self-regulation. There are lots of studies that have to do with how people feel when others that they play with kind of betray them a little bit. There are lots of studies that have to do with people who do group activities bonding, but there are not a lot of clinical terms for the word bleed, because having two kind of supposedly separate mental states is not a very common thing in most studies. I guess most of those studies would have to do with motivation and self-regulation, because it'd have to do with things like how many retail smiles can you put on before you go crazy? Or that's actually kind of a study, but not in that way.
It's a bit of a darker reasoning, but there are absolutely actors through history who have method actors who have delved so deeply into a character's mind that they can't come out on the other side. Some of them taking very drastic measures to escape that.
Yeah, that's in part kind of a safety response, and it's habituation. So once you do something enough, it'll become habit, which is another reason why bleed in quarantine is super hard. Because if you have that reward system and like every third Saturday I go play with my friends and that will be my dose of oxytocin and dopamine, if you can't do that, that's really hard. And if you can't go together in a group setting, you're losing a lot of oxytocin because it has to do with like seeing other human faces and like hugs and touching and actual physical interaction. So a lot of people are having a really hard time with bleed because they can't actually physically interact. But taking it back to kind of people turning into their actors, a lot of bleed has to do with characters that share your brain. There is no way to ever not have bleed. You are a pilot in a mecha. LARP is putting a mustache on your mecha and walking around in it. You're still the pilot. TTRPG or other roleplay is you can change your mecha, you can make it look like a cat, it can be Voltron now, but it's still the same pilot. And because you have the same brain that's actually spurting out little chemicals and little electricity, even though mind over matter is real, your mind is made of matter. So there will always be bleed, no matter what you do.
That's awesome.
Oh, sorry. Just one quick thing. When
No,
actors
please.
get stuck in that way, they're habituated. It's because the bleed has become their brain because they've been stuck piloting the mecha while it's performing Hamlet for so long that they are Hamlet.
Oh,
That's a thing?
It's not very common, but people who get really habituated to stuff, it can become part of their life. If you do something over and over again as a behavior, it'll affect your mental state, so you do the behavior.
and some of us who are more neurodivergent than neurotypical are potentially more prone to that.
Have there been any solutions to that sort of behavior yet?
It's not a very widely studied behavior because you need a lot of case studies of like people turning into their method actor character, which I'm not positive a lot of people have or are willing to be studied in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say making clear boundaries of this is game, this is an experience that was at game, and this is myself, and acknowledging bleed when it happens. When you realize there is positive or negative bleed, you have to acknowledge that and don't shove it in a corner. Think about it so that there's more of a barrier between you and your characters, no matter what kind of character you're playing.
I like the idea of that buffer. Like that's, I can see how some people might be like that. That takes away a little bit, like it mutes a little bit of the highs and lows for some people in their styles of LARPing. But at the same time, it sounds like a very responsible way of playing for your self-care.
Yeah. So I'd kind of like to steer this conversation actually to the topic that we kind of already had listed about experiencing bleed within the pandemic. Ryan, you kind of phrase it that way. What was it that you were kind of wanting to talk to Tess about? Because like Tess, you brought up a great point about like not being able to physically meet people, and we're losing our oxytocin because we're not actually able to physically be around people during the pandemic. I kind of want to like just really like dive deep into this idea because I think we're all kind of struggling with our own bleed and being able to only just sit at a camera and like not being able to physically like hold on to people when you're having a hard time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know that with LARP, in physical LARPs, traditionally you have something like afters, where you take a break, you all go and have lunch, and then you can discuss and separate yourself and like metagame all of the knowledge that you learned so that there is that separation. However, when we are in front of our Zoom cameras and we are playing that character, and then once we turn it off, yes, there's that separation if you just turned the camera off, but you still have all those emotions inside of you. In fact, one of the reasons why it's very hard for me to do online LARPs right now is because I'm always on whenever I'm on camera with people, even if it's a LARP and even if it's a live stream game. But after I turn off the camera, it's very hard for me to shut off. So one thing that we can discuss are ways to manage bleed when you don't have a way to make that separation as physical as we normally have it because of the lockdown.
I guess in terms of like brain juju, the best way to kind of negate a lot of that is to do the virtual afters. Make sure you decompress with faces. It's great to have a group chat, but hearing voices and seeing faces activates different parts of our brain than reading does. And so it kind of helps us understand that human connection better. So if after a virtual LARP, there is a set time to decompress with others, or you just have a side group chat of like your friends in the same faction or something, being able to hear or talk to each other in a debrief right after really helps with that sort of semi, oxytocin feel of we are a community. I think another thing that might be easy to do in an online LARP setting is have very clear, like, this is a player bio and this is a character bio in like a wiki so that people know, like, hey, that's not just, bad guy number one. That's also like Bob, and he has a family and he loves dinosaurs. So, kind of humanizing people makes it a lot easier for us to get the kind of vibes of LARP and social interaction. That makes sense.
That's awesome.
Ooh, like normally we don't get this kind of a lull
Yeah.
in discussion. It's just
All of us
that
absorbing.
just I think part of it was just a level of comfort with having you here, Tessa, and I think this is normally the time when we'd start wrapping up. But thank you so much for being our guest, because I came to some realizations that I didn't even think about until you were here.
Thanks. It's been great to be on.
Yes. And where can people find you on the internet or even your work?
Oh, well, if you want to, I don't know, have a virtual escape room with me voicing the pirate ghost, I do work at Hourglass Escapes. So if you Google hourglassescapes.com, there will be virtual rooms I will end up voicing. There is also Asset Tessa. So it's my name and also backwards. And you can find me on Twitter. I do have a Twitch, though I haven't been streaming very much. I will later. And on Facebook at Asset Tessa 101.
Palindromes.
Yes. Cynthia, where can people find you on the internet?
Oh man, they can find me all over the place. So let's start with the socials. Twitter is at CynDancer, and on Instagram, Cynthia__Marie. I just underwent a marathon of role playing games last weekend. So if you want to catch the video on demand, you can check out the various channels that I was on. So starting with Secret. You can check it out on this channel, specifically twitch.tv/live action roleplay, or on our video on demand. We have it on YouTube. Am I correct, Ryan?
Yes, we now
Awesome
have
sauce.
a YouTube, and I'll talk about more of that in a bit.
Awesome. Then I'm also on Call of Cthulhu on the Initiative Order. Again, you can catch the video on demand on YouTube under the Initiative Order. I'm also a guest star on wait, is it Gehenna? No, Q Times. Q Times. I'm playing Pathfinder as a guest player. I play Mia. You can also check that out. This Sunday, I will be playing again as Mia, and will also be playing Secret. The Initiative Order is also coming back October 3rd to do a part 2 for Call of Cthulhu. And then October 17th, if you guys want to literally see me cry in the middle of a role play, come catch the Initiative Order. We're playing the Aliens RPG, and I'm playing one of the pilots. I'm freaking terrified. Don't know if I'm going to make it. Hopefully I will. And then I also have a special going on October 31st. I'm going to be playing Call of Cthulhu with Gehenna Games, I think. I just have a whole bunch of stuff. Check out my social media and you'll know what's happening. Yes.
Kai.
Well, this is awful to follow Cynthia, who has everything going on. So I will be somewhat more boring in this. We do, as Sin mentioned, we have Secret, which is Community College D&D. That's going to be on Friday. Your hosts here are going to be playing it, and we're having a ton of fun with it. We obviously have this podcast. You can find me on most of the internet under Yokai Props. I don't know why you'd want to, but you're more than welcome to. I, as mentioned, I run Dystopia Rising Northern California. So if you punch that in Google, you will find various places. Come join our Facebook group for that, as we have a bunch of events, both good it was oxytocin, wasn't it, Tessa?
Oxytocin.
Yeah, good oxytocin socials, as well as some good. I am forgetting all of the science names, but some good fun role play games as well. So yeah.
And I'm Ryan Omega. You could find me here on Life Action Roleplay. I am the headmaster or dungeon master of Secret, which starts tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific. I also am on Scabby Rooster's Total Party Kills and am playing a beholder geeky sorcerer. And we now have a YouTube. And the reason why we have this YouTube is because after a while on Twitch, VODs expire, but now we have an archive where we can put in Secret. So if you want to check out previous episodes, we just started with the first episode of Secret in as a video that's been edited and put down. So we've cut out all of the be right back and starting soon, and you can get right into it. That is now on YouTube, and you will also catch me on the React channel as that has started to come back. I have a recent one that happened last week, the Try Not to Laugh challenge, and you'll see if I break. But I am on the promos, trying not to laugh. And thank you for joining us here for this episode of Live Action Roleplay. I want to thank Joe, our technical director, who's been keeping everything going. I want to thank our Patreon supporters. You will see credits of them scroll. I want to thank our newest Patreon supporters, Ruben, Lisa, and Lucy. Thank you for joining us and supporting our endeavors as we. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, you'll get to see some of the behind the scenes notes on some of our various shows, some of our projects, as well as some secret things that are coming up for Secret that my players don't necessarily know about. So you can check that at our Patreon. And we're going to raid D20 TV. So if you can give them a hi, they've been doing wonderful things. So yeah, just stay tuned and say hi to them. And thank you again, Tessa. You were such an amazing guest.
Oh, thanks.
Incredible.
Incredible. And as we say always, see you next time and bye.
Bye.
Bye.